Okay, so today we will be doing chapter 4. And for today's class, we need a moment of introduction. So, one of the things we've talked about is how Yechezkel is the priestly prophet, right? So he's also a Kohen, in addition to being a Navi. And when it comes to being a Kohen, so Rabbi Eitan Meyer, who is a peer of Rabbi Angel, so had a theory about kahuna in general, and Rabbi Chaim Angel uses that theory to then create kind of a format to explain some of the details about Yechezkel's prophecy in general. So Rabbi Meyer's theory is that a Kohen has a lot of jobs, right? So if you want to just give me some jobs Kohen has. What are some of the jobs Kohen does? Brings the korbanot, right? Yeah. What else does he do?
Now he's the first Aliyah.
First Aliyah, good. Right? I don't know if they call that a job. That's like that's an honor.
It's an honor, right?
What's something else that they do? So that's part of the service, right? So service, I would say, is one piece. But what else? They still do it today.
To redeem the firstborn.
So yeah, there's a whole bunch of gifts. Again, the gifts, I'm not sure if that's an honor or a responsibility. So the pidyon haben, the tithes, the truma, all but he gets stuff out of it, like he gets paid. So those are all, I think, rewards. His jobs, what? The blessings, very good, right? So the Kohen blessings, and then there's one more that a little bit more amorphous, but in general, because the Kohanim were part of Mishmarot, they were part of these watching groups, so they only were on, so to speak, during very specific times of the year, and then during the holiday season when it was very busy, so more of them would come. But in general, they were not in the Beit HaMikdash. In general, because of that, they were the teachers. So the way that it worked often was the Kohanim and Leviim were either doing service or they were teaching the Jewish people. Those were the main jobs that the Kohanim had. They were the teachers, the blessings, and the service in the Beit HaMikdash. Now, if you think about that, two of those three are representing one party, and one of those three is representing a different party. Okay? When the Kohanim do this service in the Beit HaMikdash, they represent the Jewish people, right? The Choshen, right, it represents the 12 tribes that the Kohen Gadol wears, right? All the services that the Kohanim do in the Beit HaMikdash represent the Jewish people to God. When they teach the Jewish people, so it's an interesting kind of in-between, maybe representing God teaching the Jewish people, maybe helping the Jewish people connect back with God. There, when I get a little bit more amorphous. And then the blessings is the Kohanim standing in for God, right? Blessing the Jewish people, right, as the kind of the human representative of God to the Jewish people. So the way that Rabbi Meir explains this is that Kohanim are a pipeline. They're the connection point between God and the Jewish people. And in order to not break that pipe, right, to break that connection, to some extent, Kohanim have to be extremely passive. When you think about ingenuity in the Beit HaMikdash, it's frowned upon, right? When Aaron's children decide to bring a Ketoret sacrifice when it was not preordained, it was not commanded, they die for it, right? There's no room for ingenuity in the practices of what is brought when. It's very set. You don't add to the Beit HaMikdash service. On the other hand, right, there are technological advances that happen in the Beit HaMikdash. If you learn the Mishnayos and Yoma, you'll see there's a whole bunch of people who upgraded the Beit HaMikdash by adding more gold or adding more versions of certain things. So that there's space for, but in terms of service, in terms of that connection point between God and the Jewish people, it's very static. There's not an opportunity for ingenuity in the regular service. There are special occasions, right? There's like the inauguration of the Mishkan, where they're to some extent, but that was not even necessarily brought by it wasn't the Kohanim, it was more the Nesiim. When the Kohanim are involved, it's very passive. And Rabbi Angel felt that theory is super helpful for explaining some of the passivity of Yechezkel in this book. Because to some extent, when Yechezkel is passive, we've seen time and time again that what happens? God steps in, right? And God almost becomes a more direct player in trying to transmit a certain message to the Jewish people through this conduit, through this pipeline of Yechezkel. So, what I want to show is that in the Perek Daled, we continue to have the notion of the Kehuna, right? Certain aspects of it highlighted in terms of being a representative for both the Jewish people and God. We're going to see that very much play out in how the fourth chapter, right, comes to be. Because the fourth chapter is a lot of this dramatic activities that are supposed to represent certain things. But we're going to see Yechezkel being representative of both God and the Jewish people, line after line within the same story. So he's going to kind of be jumping back and forth between, am I standing in for God? Am I standing in for the Jewish people? And the answer is going to be both, because after all, that is at the core of what Kehuna is all about. So let's open up chapter 4.
So when you say passivity,
yeah,
that passive because it's already set, is that what you mean? I'm not sure what you mean by his passivity.
Yechezkel's passivity?
Yechezkel's not.
So when I talk about Yechezkel's passivity, I'm talking about how in chapter 3 and even earlier, there are a lot of times where God says something to him, and instead of jumping up and doing it, he just kind of sits on his hands.
Yeah, but that's not what I mean. I'm sorry, I meant it wrong.
You meant the Kohanim.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the Kohanim, I mean that there's no ingenuity. You can't add new right approaches to the korbanot. You have to have the correct kavanah. You have to bring the right amount of animals. You have to shach them the right exact way. You have to sprinkle the blood in the exact location. Right? If you mess up any of these things, the korban is null and void. Right? You can get in trouble if you're doing certain things on purpose the wrong way. Right? It's very you're supposed to be an automaton. You're not supposed to bring your opinions for how these things are done. You're just supposed to do them the way that they've been done, because being that connection point, right, requires you to be a little bit more passive. Otherwise, if you put yourself in there and you dominate, then you lose both the Jewish people and God in that process. If you want to represent both, you have to be very passive.
Okay.
So, Perek Daled. V'ata ben adam, kach lecha leveinav v'nesata ota lefanecha. So take a brick and put it in front of you. V'chakota aleha ir es Yerushalayim. And you should etch and sketch on it, right, on this brick. So he was apparently some sort of molder. He was a sculptor, right? So he sculpts on this brick a city which is representative of Yerushalayim. V'nesata aleha matzur. And then I want you to kind of it's like he's playing, right? So
army man.
Yeah, your little army, exactly, right? I want you to put a siege around the brick. Uvanisa alea dayek.
Multimedia is what
Right, and then I want you to build a dayek. So dayek is a interesting word. So either it means a kind of like it means a mound. So according to Rashi, it means a mound of dirt that would help them shoot arrows. So either it was a mound of dirt that came all the way up the wall, so they could kind of come over the wall and shoot down, or it was some kind of elevated place further away from the wall so they can shoot over, something like that. And then there's another view that it's a catapult of some sort, that it's you're building some sort of thing that you're going to be able to chuck things over. So either it's a mound of dirt or it's some contraption that. But either way, the same idea of being able to shoot over the wall.
Now, is this a new prophecy? What is this he's doing?
So this is God telling him to kind of do this. So this is again another dramatic. He's doing something, and it's representative of something. But we're going to kind of play out exactly what it is representative of. And one of the interesting things is the Parshanim discussed. So he's like playing menchis in his room. So like, does anyone hear about this? Like, how does that happen? Right, so either people come in and see him doing this, and then they spread the word, or, right, he actually does this, and then he goes out and says, "This is what God told me to do." So after doing it, he actually then goes and tells people about it, because it's a little bit of a strange situation, right? So he's playing Here he has this brick which represents Yerushalayim. He makes a siege around it, and then he creates either a mound of dirt for the pit to shoot over, or a catapult system, something like that. V'shafachta aleha solala, and he pours like a pile of dirt on top of it. V'sata aleha machanot, and then he places camps all around it. V'sim aleha karim saviv, and karim also interesting, exactly what that means. The Maharikra says it is rams of steel, so probably means battering rams. Rashi says it's villages. It's lots of villages, basically quoting Onkelos, and basically it was so many camps that it was kind of like as if there were these massive amounts of people that it could have been like a town or village all around the situation. So he had a lot of menchies, right? So that's the scene that he's playing with these little pieces. V'ata kach lecha machavat barzel v'natata ota kir barzel beinecha uvein ha'ir v'hachinosa es panecha aleha v'haita v'matzor v'tzarta aleha osi leves Yisrael. So now I want you to take a iron pan, and I want you to put it next to the wall, between you and the wall, and then I want you to take your face and put it right next to the pan, right? And now there's going to be a siege, and right, it's going to be a sign for the Jewish people, right, that what's going to happen. So what is that? Any thoughts what that is? What just happens in that pasuk? He takes a pan and he puts it between him and the wall, and he puts his face up against the pan, and that's now there's going to be a siege, right? So what's going on?
I mean, is it representing Hashem as the driving force behind the siege that's coming?
Yeah, exactly. So the Parshanim explain that when he puts his face behind the pan, it's as if it's a Hester Panim, right? It's basically God hiding his face from the wall, creating a separation between himself and Yerushalayim, which allows for the siege to move forward, right? As long as God was there, as long as God's protection was over Yerushalayim, it was. So all of a sudden, Yechezkel in this moment is stand-in for God, right? In the beginning, right, he is setting up his little menchies, which is like he's setting up the Jewish camp and then the situation, and now all of a sudden he's representative of God, okay? V'ata shechav al tzidecha hasmali v'samta es avon beis Yisrael alav mispar hayamim asher tishkav alav tisa et avonam. So now he says, I want you to lie on your left side, and basically for all of the sins of the Jewish people, the number of days that you should sit is the number of days that I held their sin. Okay? So again, he's representative of, in the same sentence, he's lying on his side, representing the Jewish people 1 day per year for all of their sins, but also the amount of time that God was tisa et avonam, right? That God held onto or carried their burden, carried their sins, right? So he's lying there passively on his left side all this time. Now, the left side, we're going to see in a second, is representative of the Malchut Yisrael. There's a little bit of a time question that no one has a really good answer for, because the Malchut Yisrael did not last 390 years. They lasted closer to 240 years. So some people say, so basically what everyone tries to do is try to figure out where to start, and a lot of people go back to the Shoftim. They go back further where there was sins and stuff happening that wasn't good either, but it's still a little bit of a head scratcher because, right, Yerav ben Nevat is the beginning, and then, right, it ends when the 10 tribes are sent into exile. So that's a very set amount of time. So to say that it's referring to the 10 tribes while they're under the kingdom of Yehuda, a little bit of an interesting thing. The second piece is, we're going to see it's 390 days, and then 40 days on the right side. So keep on going. V'ani nasati lecha et shnei avonam lemispar yamim Shalosh me'os v'tishim yom v'nesata avon beis Yisrael. So every day, every year that I held on to their sins, you're going to lie on your side one day. So he's on his side, by the way, for 390 days here. That's a long time lying on your side. You can imagine people come visiting him. That's over a year of him lying on his side. V'chilita et eila, and when you finish this, v'shechavta al yitzida tidecha hayimani, you're going to lie down on your right side. Shenit, a second time, v'nesata et avon beit Yehuda, and that's representative of the time lag between when Yerav ben Nevat, when the kingdom of Yisrael is no longer because of the exile, and then you have this time lag between then and the actual destruction when there still is Malchut Yehuda continuing. So that's 40 more days, which represents 40 more years, right? Arba'im yom l'shana nesativ lach. So now he is in the same action representing the Jewish people by lying down and God by carrying their sins, right? And he is kind of this really strange, passive situation. The whole story is strange. And again, this whole piece, this whole thing, right, is discussed as, right, being this action that's taking place in his home, and then either people come visit him and be like, whoa, what's going on here? Or, right, after doing this, he goes out and says, you know what I did? I was on my side for 390 days because you guys sinned for 390 years, and then another 40 days on my other side for the 40 more years. But regardless, it's a disconcerting image, but it really highlights and speaks to, again, the passivity of Yechezkel as well as his representation of both God and the Jewish people, and how that is a very Kohen trait. Fine. Now, Pasuk Zayin. Ve'el mitzor Yerushalayim tachin panecha, uzro'acha chasufa v'nibeta aleha. So now, he says, I want you to now move your face towards the siege of Yerushalayim, and prepare your face, and then bare your arm, and you're going to now have a prophecy against this. So the bearing of your arm, I always picture the picture you can do, right? So it's kind of like it's meant to be a threatening pose, and here, right, going back and forth between representing the Jewish people and representing God. So now he's representing God, right? Again, about the impending destruction of what's going to is very soon happen to Yerushalayim. Pasuk Ches. V'hinei nasati alecha avosim, v'lo tehapech mitzidecha el tidecha ad kalosecha yimim mitzurecha. And now he throws ropes over Yechezkel, and you can't move until you finish, right, these 430 years, right, of bondage. Right, and the number 430, the 390 plus, so the 430 days representing the 430 years. So the first Beit HaMikdash, by most accounts, lasted only 410 years, right? So that's why this number is like a little bit of a hard number for some of them to figure out, and that's why they jump back to the Shoftim. It still has a little bit more questions than I have good answers for, but it's definitely supposed to be representative of the sins of the Jewish people over the last number of years, and how long God has kind of been holding that sin back from being punished. Ve'ata kach lecha chitin u'seorin ufol v'adashim v'dochan v'kusmin v'nasata otam b'kli achad v'asita otam lecha lachem mispar hayamim asher ata shochev al tzidecha shalosh meos v'tishim yom tochlanu. So I want you to make all this food so that you have food while you're lying on your side, right? So you have a food per day. And then he only eats for the 390 years, is 390 days. It's not clear what happens for those last 40 days. Is he not eating those last 40 days? Is he, once he's eating for the first days, he's also eating for the second days. So again, the Parshanim struggle to figure out what is true, what is not true. They just note that it seems funny that after going to 390 and 40, only the 390 are accounted for. Uma achalcha asher tochlenu b'mishkol esrim shekel liyom me'et ad 8 tochlenu. Right, so you eat a certain amount, very, very standardized amount, right, for every single one of these days. So part of the idea here, right, is when you're kind of under siege, right, you end up eating like rationed food to some extent, right, and again, he's managing to do this very strange go back and forth between representing God, representing the Jewish people, and what they're experiencing, right, during this moment. And so he has this back and forth. So just to give you a sense, the possibilities for what 20 shkalim of bread equals. So the range is somewhere between 8 grams and 16 grams. There's possibility of it being 8 grams, 16 grams, 11.39 grams, depending on what shekel we're talking about, from which exact time period, whether it's talking about shkalim in Babylonia, big shekel, small shekel, shkalim in Israel at that time. But those are kind of the math. So it's not that much. So you have the translation is either 160, 229, or 320 grams of bread per day, which is not that much, and then not that much water either, which we'll see in a second. So good. So umayim b'misura tishteh shishi tahin me'et ad 8 tishteh. Right, so, and water also you're limiting, right? So by measure you shall drink 1/6 of a hin, from this time to that time shall you drink it. So 1/6 of a hin, again, just to give you a sense of what that is, so that's either 1.1, 1.84, or 3.3 liters, because 1/6 of a hin is 0.55 liters. So that's very little water. It's not a lot of water. So you have very little water, a little bit of bread, and again, it's a notion of when you're under siege, right? You're going to be in trouble in terms of your food, in terms of your drink, and so he's limited to this small amount of food. He's not exerting his body too much, but still, I'm sure it was not the easiest thing to go through with. Not only that, but the process of making the food is not so pleasant either. So, Vugat seorim tochlena vihi bigelele tseat ha'adam teugena le'enehem. So, how are you going to? What's going to be your yeah? Tell me about it. What's going to be your fuel for the fire? You're going to use human excrement, and you're going to do it right in front of them, because again, when you're under siege, you run out of wood. You don't have wood. You need the wood for different weapons or whatever that you need it for. You don't have that luxury of using that, excuse me, for the fuel to make your food, as opposed to human feces, which doesn't have much use, apparently could fuel fire. Don't try it at home. So you have this really disturbing image, right, of what exactly he's doing, right, as representative of the Jewish people under this siege, and what that must have been like. And it's pretty disturbing. So two things I wanted to do. So first, I wanted to just the notion that this is referring to, that the pan that we spoke about earlier is referring to God, that Yechezkel is standing in for God, actually comes from a Gemara in Brachos, Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis. I meant to read it inside before, but we'll do it now. So, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Miyom Shecharav Beit HaMikdash, Nifseka Chomat Barzel Bein Yisrael Aviem Sheba Shamayim. From the day that the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, an iron curtain fell down and blocked between the Jewish people and their Father in heaven. Shne'emar in Yechezkel Perek Daled, V'ata kach lecha machavat barzel v'zata ota kir barzel beinecha uvein ha'ir. So that view in Chazal of how you read that pasuk, that there was now this blockage between, an iron blockage between the Jewish people and God, which is something that Yechezkel is doing, right? So all the Parshanim kind of pick up on this Gemara and say that's what's going on here, that Yechezkel is standing in for God. One other piece, so you have, so, where is this? Okay, so let me just, so let's take a step back and review, and then we're going to kind of finish this up in a minute. So we started by talking about how a priest is a passive participant in the service of God. Ingenuity is not something that we really require. And we talked about also how a Kohen is particularly important as a representative of both the Jewish people as well as God. It's also interesting to note that prophets themselves also find themselves in this interesting kind of place as a representative of God and the Jewish people. In the past, we talked about the difference between someone like Eliyahu versus someone like Elisha, right? That Eliyahu was really a stand-in for God. He gets really angry at the Jewish people all the time. He hits them over the head all the time, right? He yells at them all the time. He doesn't seem to be on their side. He seems to be on God's side and trying to communicate that to the Jewish people, as opposed to Elisha, right, his student, who is the flip opposite, right? Elisha was one of the guys. He is always kind of trying to pick people up and lift them up and tell them they're okay. He's like a Hasidic Rebbe a little bit, right? Elisha was really a representative of the people communicating to God. That was the general direction of the relationship. And it's interesting here, right, that Yechezkel, as a priestly prophet, right, as a Kohen, you're always in between. Prophets often had kind of one viewpoint or the other, and Yechezkel, right, molds these two roles folds them into this one kind of piece. Now I'm trying to think if I missed anything. So if we were just going to review the theme, because we're going to reference it a little bit here and there, but this is kind of the main point where I just wanted to highlight this combination between priest and prophet. So we highlighted in the beginning of the book, right, the one view that the 30 years was 30 years old, and if you do the math, so his prophecy lasts from 30 to 50, which is the time of the service of a Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash, right? We've highlighted the fact that the whole conversation about Ben Adam, right? That the notion that he's son of man, as opposed to being Yechezkel, it's basically to remove his personality from the book, which allows for God's kind of message to be more directly connected to the Jewish people, which again, from the perspective of Kohen being a connection between the two, right? So you want to be as small as possible to allow for that connection to happen, which is perhaps why he's called Ben Adam 93 times in this book, and the word only appears one other time in all of Tanakh. We talked about Yechezkel's muteness and his passivity in chapters 2 and 3, and how those things also fit into this kind of picture of what a priestly prophet looks like. And then in this chapter, we finished kind of this arc by talking about, right, how Yechezkel is representation of both God and the Jewish people, and therefore, right, he swings back and forth in his dramatic presentation of this siege of Jerusalem with the little menchies and then with this iron pan and everything else, he goes back and forth. Who is he representing? Is he representing the Jewish people? Yes. Is he representing God? Yes. And he kind of swings back and forth as a Kohen does, with on the one hand blessing the Jewish people as a representative for God, or bringing the korbanot to God as a representative of the Jewish people. Right? You have these two pieces of kehuna, and they come together. So that's kind of the overarching theory that we will now, from this point forward, probably just reference here and there. But this is kind of, I wanted to put all the pieces together in one place so you kind of see where this idea resonates from. So we're going to finish the chapter and then we'll hold off until next week. So, Vayomer Hashem, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Pasuk 13. God says, Kacha yochlu b'nei Yisrael es lachmam tamei bagoyim asher adicham sham. Right, so will they eat their bread unclean amongst the nations that I banished them. Va'omar aha Adonai Elohim hine nafshi lo mituma'a univela utrefa lo achalti min urai va'arata v'lo ba bifi basar pigul. So, alas, Hashem Elohim, right? My soul has not been defiled. I have never eaten meat, carrion, nor meat that from a wounded animal from my youth until now, nor has loathsome meat ever come into my mouth. Right, let's keep on going for a second. Vayomer Eli re'ena sati lecha es tzipi'e habakar tachas golei adam v'asita es lachmecha aleihem. Right, I permitted you the dung of cattle instead of human excrement. You may prepare your food upon them. Vayomer Eli ben Adam hineni shover matei lechem b'Yerushalayim v'achlu lechem b'mishkal u'v'da'aga u'v'mayim b'msura u'v'shemimon yishtu. And he says, okay, so son of man, behold, I am breaking a staff of bread in Jerusalem, and the people will eat bread by weight and with worry, and drink water by measure with consternation. So this is kind of what we said before, how what he was doing was representative of what's going to be happening in Yerushalayim, that there is going to be rations required, and they're going to be eating disgustingly baked foods and very little water. And L'ma'an yichseru lechem u'mayim v'nashamu ish v'achiv v'namaku v'avonam. Right, and because they lack bread and water, right, so they'll all become confused, and they're going to basically die in their sins, not being able to reform because they're just so confused at this point. It's basically too little, too late. So the piece about in Pasuk Yudalid, right? That so Yechezkel kind of objects to the food, and then I don't know personally. I'm not sure what's worse, but he says, okay, human excrement. You don't have to use animal excrement. Yeah, exactly. So. I didn't see anything that was particularly helpful for explaining exactly what was going on here. I thought maybe you could say that again, the dragging of his feet, right? It just kind of fits with, right? He never kind of jumps at whatever God says. It's always either just slow, or here he's actually kind of I'd rather not. And the truth is, right, to some extent, right, different prophets do very drastic, dramatic things to make a point. But lying on your side for 430 days, and then in the process eating very little, and on top of that, eating and drinking very little that was made in an absolutely gross way. I mean, God's asking a lot of Yechezkel, but I think the drama is meant to show what is going to happen, right? Meaning Yerushalayim is going to be destroyed, and it's not going to be pretty. And trying to communicate that in a dramatic fashion to the Jewish people, I think, is his goal. This exact, it might be to kind of highlight again, right? The Kohanim are always very careful what they eat, right? And so, to some extent, right, being forced to down this path is a way of almost highlighting how uncomfortable it is for Yechezkel. But I didn't see anything that was particularly helpful or inspiring to get us through those psukim. But that's the kind of...
it's interesting because, he's in exile, right? And so the exiles will not see what Jerusalem is like during the siege.
Right.
And so he will he's gonna look like he's personally been in the siege. He's gonna look terrible by the time he's done. And in some ways that's like the physical representation.
No, 100%. Right, 100%. His audience are the people that are not going to be part of the siege.
Right.
So he's trying to communicate with them how bad it's going to be when they are not going to actually see it. So exactly my point.
How long before the siege is this taking place?
So,
or are they in siege
so
right now?
So he starts 6 years before the siege, his prophecy. So between now and then, there's not a date. We don't have a year. So
So it might be happening during the siege.
it could be happening during the siege. It could be happening a couple years beforehand. It's not exactly. It's somewhere in between.
So the ultimate purpose of this, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
And like Steve said, the purpose is to show people in Babel what it is that either they're going through. If you did it in advance, it's okay. Here's what I don't think it's
happening.
For reform, that's what I'm.
It's unlikely it's happening right now because there's a lot more to happen in the book before the actual destruction. But it's within striking distance, meaning no matter when it happens, it's not that far off. Especially if he's doing this for 430 days. Like, it's a year and a little bit. Like, that's a pretty significant amount of time of 6 years to be doing something. So, yeah.
I guess what I'm asking is he trying to induce any change in behavior?
So it's not clear, and meaning he never seems to. That doesn't, in general, Yechezkel doesn't seem to demand that. It's a really.
It's the wrong people to demand.
Exactly.
As well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. He's preaching to the choir, so to speak. He's not meaning it's not the people who he needs to get to reform their ways, but. Yeah.
Well, I would never say they're lucky to have been exiled, but in some way they're going to be lucky not to be there at the time of the siege, and so.
Right. I mean, they don't feel that way.
To your point about the consolation aspect of this book, in some way you're saying, look, you think you have it bad.
Right.
Look, either what's about to happen or what's happening.
Right. Meaning, but the thing is, until it happens, no one takes him seriously, right? Which is part of also why the drama is so important, because he's trying to make the point. And they're all like, yeah, God's not letting his house get destroyed. It's just not happening, right? And so, but this whole build-up is going to help him, right, with the latter part of the book to give them hope.
So shouldn't Yirmiyahu be doing this to the people in Israel? Is it too
So,
late for them?
So Yirmiyahu tries. Not with the Yirmiyahu is not quite as dramatic in terms of his actions as Yechezkel is. But he talks to them a lot. He uses a lot of words in terms of trying to get them to...
Because if they would have done teshuvah, it might have turned the whole thing around.
Yeah, for sure. They didn't really respect Yirmiyahu either, though. They didn't believe him either.
Thrown him down a pit.
Yeah. They kill him.
Yeah.
But... Yeah.
I guess the question, you've mentioned this before, which is, at some point they had good kings after evil ones.
Yeah.
You said, or they said, it's too late.
Right.
So the question is, what is it, even with Yirmiyahu, what would he accomplish? In other words, is there time for tshuva? It doesn't sound like that's even possible.
So that's the interesting question. That's the question that's like $1 million question. You never really know for sure. Is there ever a point which is too late? Right? So it's not clear. At the same time, prophets talk like there is. Right? There are times where it seems like there's a gzirat din. There's been a decree from heaven, and we say Krora Gzar Dinenu, right? Like we in our davening we say, oh, you had a Gzar Din, tear it up, right? So like you can have a fait accompli, you can have right, this is going to happen, and then still in the ninth inning, right, things can turn around in theory. So you kind of have it both ways. But I feel like what happens is at some point the momentum is moving in that direction so much that you require a tremendous effort to be able to undo that. And so to some extent it's going to happen unless, right, everyone gets on board. But it's probably going to happen, right? I think that's kind of the balance that they're trying to strike. But yeah, I don't know.
We're told it's never too late.
And I think that's the message that we want to hear, and I think that's the message that, as a rabbi, that I would say. But I'm just saying there are prophets who seem to say it's happening.
I mean, to your dying day, a case with Elisha ben Avuya, right? It's
Yeah.
not too late.
Right?
He's on his deathbed. It's
Yeah.
not too late. You still
100%.
can turn it around.
Right? So it's unclear if that would be true for an entire nation too. You'd think for sure, or you'd think, meaning this is part of the destiny and the history and it has to happen. I don't know. It's hard. I don't have a good answer. But I would say that it's never too late also. That's my instinct tells me that, but we have instances where it sounds like it's too late. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll pick up with Perek Hay next week.